we hear him? Is that David?
Yes, hello.
Sorry, not yet.
Not yet. So Viva is a performance art festival. It's a biennial event. It happens every 2 years. It's collectively organized by a number of artist-run centers here in Montreal and with Viva, the organization. It's a 4-day event publicly. It's a week-long event internally for the artists and participants. The focus of our programming is around action art and live art practices, which include performance art, but also other forms of performative practice, which you may be less familiar with. These include furtive practices, public intervention, relational art, body art, public intervention, and these forms that often tend to resist traditional forms of dissemination. So what that means is that we often privilege the participation and the inclusion of artists, practices, and processes that find it difficult to share their work within traditional contexts, whether those be galleries, stages, festivals, cinemas. And the way we do that is when we invite artists to come to the festival, we give them. So much of the way we do our programming is through relationships and trust. We invite artists to come to the context of the festival. We send them images and information, and then we let them come up with a dream project that they'd want to do, and then we adapt that. So that means the artist isn't only coming up with the action they want to do, but also the context of encounter with the action. So that means some artists are going to choose to do a performance or an action in front of an audience in an evening where people can clap at the end and see and engage with the work. Other artists will choose to work off-site, publicly, or invisibly. So sometimes we announce where those actions in public space are going to happen. Sometimes we don't. We let the audience find them if they can, and if not, we let the artwork itself encounter its audience by accident. We also have artists who choose to have one-on-one encounters with their audience, or who choose to pick their audience. So we'll develop a performance for one person, for a group of people. And this creates quite a number of logistical challenges for us as an organization, because everyone's needs changes quite differently from one project to the other. But it feels important for us to gather what we consider allied practices. So we feel that allied practices around live art are often fragmented. So often artists tend to work in off-site spaces and marginal spaces in their studios, and don't often have a chance to gather and encounter with other artists. So this brings me back to the structure of the festival. Like I said, it's 4 days for the public, but the artists are all invited to stay with us for the duration of the festival, which includes 2 preparatory days. So they all come earlier, they come in the space, we eat food together, we meet each other, they get over their jet lag, they get to discover sort of some particularities of the architecture of the space and also of the context of Montreal and of Quebec and of Canada. And within that, they're invited to generate a work. So some processes, we know what's going to happen, the artists let us know, and we expect what's going to be presented at the end, but other artists arrive on Monday and have no idea yet what they're going to do. And so we hold them in that process and we facilitate with them so that they can come and work as they see fit within their context. So a big part of our programming is centered around the kitchen. So Viva has a community kitchen at the heart of our programming. It's been there since 2006 when we started. It started off as a functional tool because the best way to keep people healthy and happy is to feed them. And as you all know, as students and artists, sometimes life gets in the way and you don't actually have time to feed yourself properly or take very basic care. And so we decided quite rapidly that this would be a pillar of the festival. And so we have a community kitchen, and that feeds all of the artists, staff, volunteers, and helpers throughout the day for free. And then in the evening, the public is invited to come and eat with us. You can participate for free, or for a modest price, you can come and get a plate. And that money gets folded back into continuing the community kitchen for the next day and the next week. What's important or particular about the community kitchen is that over the years, we've been able to reinforce it. So now we hire staff to help the artist in residence. And each year, it's biannual, so every 2 years, we host an artist in residence in the community kitchen, which means we bring in an artist whose art practice involves working with food somehow. Often these are relational practices, so often it's artists whose artwork is rooted in meeting and encounter, and that meeting and encounter happens around food somehow. So it can happen either in the preparation of the food, in the sharing of the food, or in the way the food is given. And so over the years, we've been able to better frame and make visible the artistic side of this platform to, I think, highlight the fact that many artists working professionally choose not to work in museums or major institutions and choose to develop practices that have a very basic human function, so that are serving a social need, and to highlight and value the artistic content in that gesture as as valid as an aesthetic sort of approach to art making. So this year, we made an open call for the first time, and we were thrilled to discover David Sebastian's process and practice. He's an artist who's worked with food in many different contexts in his work and in his life. He's done infiltration projects, where his art has really invested itself into an area of service that you wouldn't expect. So maybe you might have, if you were in Denmark, encountered his art without even knowing it. He's also worked relationally, one-on-one in discussions and encounters with people, and he works performatively. And we were really excited to bring him. And one of the characteristics of live art is that it requires a live body. And as many of you, I am sure know, bodies are difficult for many reasons and unpredictable. And one of those reasons is politics and bureaucracy. So David is originally from Colombia. He has a Colombian citizenship. So he has applied, he is required to apply for a visa to come to Canada to share his work with us. He's currently living in Denmark, but that process is still necessary. And he unfortunately has not received his visa yet. So we've been waiting, and there are delays, and we've been working hard to solve those delays and push those processes. But another position Viva has, recognizing the sort of fragility of human bodies and human experience, is to not let these kind of politics erase or eclipse the participation of people. So we made a decision quite a number of years ago, when the very first experience we had of an artist not attaining their visa, that instead of pretending everything was okay and happy family and erasing that, that we would consciously keep that artist in the programming. We would still give that artist their artist fee, and that we would make that visible. So the first time that happened was in 2013, and on the artist's page of the website, instead of documentation, that artist had gotten a refusal. So with David, this is a different situation. We're still waiting. So we have hope that the paperwork will be processed in the next couple of days, and we will be able to bring him to Montreal. But in this case of this other artist, we, with their consent, posted the refusal letter for the visa as the documentation of the performance, and then Skyped them in for a conference around themes of mobility, politics, and identity. So we're hoping this is not going to be the case with David, but it means that as we're coming to crunch time, the festival opens publicly next week. He has very generously and creatively worked with us to develop a project in 2 parts. So we have a plan A, in which he will be present with us and working with the team to infiltrate himself the performative meals every evening. And then if not, we have a plan B, in which we will find different strategies with him to facilitate his presence through a distance, whether that be through performative scores, which is something he's going to share with you today, performative objects, Skype, or sound recordings. So it was just important for me to take a few minutes to explain the context in the platform, but also, again, in line with the sort of politics that we have, to make visible the fact that the artists we get to see share their work in Montreal, in Canada, and different places in the world, the issues and realities that govern who shares their work when and how are very real obstacles, and these are particularly challenging obstacles for artists who work with their body and who root their artwork in encounter that require those kind of connections. So I think this is a really important learning opportunity to make visible some of the real challenges that we see around performance that I feel we don't often get to talk about. I won't spend too much time on this. I will pass very quickly the mic to David, but again, I want to thank you all for your presence and your écoute, your attention. And I will stay here also if you have questions about the festival. We have programs that I've brought here in the corner that you can take. We also have a website that's really dynamic and fun that you can go scroll through and see. And all of our artistic programming is free. So if you do not have, or if you have not had the privilege or to encounter live art in its various forms, we invite you generously to come to Viva. You will be shocked, you will be surprised, you might be upset, but we guarantee you that we will hold that space with you, and we will all collectively live some moments that hopefully will generate some meaning and reflections for all of us together. So hopefully we'll see some of you next week.
All right, so we're going to turn the mic over to David, but for all of you in the auditorium, so you know, this is our version of David in addition to the screen that you'll see projected. So you will see me playing with this little orb, and that is so that David can see you see him. So do know that he can see you and you can wave to him. Thanks, good precedent there. Hi, David. Hola.
Hello. Hola.
if there is any sort of drop in Skype or maybe sound failure, we'll just figure it out and be patient. And we have Johnny, so we can take it away. Thank you very much for staying up late and for joining us, David.
Thank you so much to you for the invitation. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Johnny, for the technical support. Thank you, Michelle, for the invitation to Viva Live Art Action. Okay, should I start?
Yes, take it away.
Okay. Okay, hello. My name is David Sebastian Lopez Restrepo. As you already know, I'm a Colombian artist based in Denmark, currently developing my artworks here in Denmark. And I'm supposed to be in Canada right now, but some issues didn't allow me to be there with you. But I would like to talk about performance and about specifically my practice on performance art. But first, I would like to introduce you one of my performance art because I would like to have this as a material to start a discussion about the practice of performance art mediated by the food. So this performance you will see, it happened a couple of months ago in a place called Union, a cultural center, very diverse in Copenhagen, and the performance is called Food J. Johnny will be able to move the focus of the camera to all perspectives. It was recorded in 360 in virtual reality. So that means that you can go to YouTube and look in your VR devices. So yeah, it is ready.
Yep, David is ready.
Yes, Johnny's got the
switch
video
over
queued.
now.
We're going to
Thank
take
you
you
so
off
much.
screen, but you
Yep.
can still see us.
Okay.
Hello. I would like to invite you to eat something that is really important for my culture and brings a lot of memory for me. So this is something very, very traditional in Colombia called papas chorreadas. It's something that it was pretty important for me when I was a child and also when I was starting my career as a teacher of arts. So it's pretty simple. It's basically potatoes and like a sauce made out of tomato, onion, garlic. Like it's completely vegan. But the idea, I want to make a relationship with you. So I would like you to eat with your very hands. So if somebody has problems with using your own hands, we have two buttons like around here, and you can basically wash your hands if you have problems with that, and come here and eat. But the only thing for eating is before eating, you have to touch the black cables. Have this thing in the end, so you have to touch the black cable in order to take the food. Because as soon you get the black cable, this is an earth, yeah? So basically the thing is, when you took the earth and you took the food from this aluminum thing, you will make the energy to run around your body. You can see, you can hear? Yes. You will make the sound and the energy go through your body. So basically I want to take my memories through your body, okay? So you are all welcome to eat these papas chorreadas, and please feel my memories in your bodies, okay? I have like 6 air poles, so you just have to take them. I will put some sauce, and you just have to eat it. So be my guest. I will serve for you, and then if you don't eat, I will not have sounds for you. So I will not be able to mix the sounds because I need that relation. okay? Because it's like, memory is like that. Memory is made out of relations. We remember our relations. So I want you to come here. And eat with your bare hands, like you took the potato, holding the air, and just eat. And there's a lot of potatoes. So I think it's also about to share. So if we run out of potatoes, you have to share with your neighbor. Maybe you will make a new friend that will be very important for building your own memories around this thing that we are doing tonight, okay? So don't be shy. Remember to today. Yes, and then you took something in order to make the sound. Can you see if you touch it, you start feeling something. Really cool. You are all welcome to eat there. Don't worry. Now you have all my memories inside your body. Thank you so much.
Right.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I wanted to show you this video because it's part of this presentation, and I would like to talk about how the process and the interaction with the audience is the main ingredient of my performances. Ingredient, I should say, is the correct word to explain it, because I cook in my performances and I share. And without the audience, I cannot do any kind of performance, because it's so necessary for me to invite and to involve the audience in my pieces. So this presentation will be about the process as the main ingredient of the performance art, in my case. So I would like to divide this presentation in three main parts. The first one is the performance as a product. Second is the performance in relation with the audience, and then the performance as a document or as a part of documentation. So, to start, the performance as a product, if we think about performance as a product, performance is an action that is made through the body of the artist. The body of the artist is the main thing, the main material, the materiality of the performance art, of the artwork. So without the body of the artist, there is no performance. So right now we are trying to do something that is not a performance, because I'm not there. I'm not able to be there with you. So you cannot feel my body. You cannot see that I'm sweating. I'm nervous. You can probably not hear my breathing, that right now it's a little bit different than a few minutes ago. So that is the product of the performance itself. And we can have another kind of products like photographies, videos, other things mediated by technology, but it's not the performance itself. So I would like to speak about how the performance for me is a process that has several interactions and exchanges. That means that the performance is made with a before, during, and an after. Before, because we have some kind of preparation, I cook the food, but I also relate that food with my experiences of life. So I never do a performance that doesn't have nothing to do with my personal history. But it doesn't mean that it's self-referential, because I also work with
Just
the
for the
idea.
record, David, if you can hear me, we've lost connection.
Okay.
Oh, you're back. You're back.
Okay.
And there was like a very beautiful flow you were in. So please continue. You
Don't
were
worry.
just saying, we lost you when you were explaining that you don't do art that is not in relation to your personal life.
Yes. Okay. I don't do performances without relating with my personal history, but doesn't mean that it is self-referential, because my personal story also is related with my country history. That food that I present you in this performance was very important for me and also for my neighbors. And you can ask to any Colombian you have close to you, and they will be related with that food. And that's why I think that this stage before of the performance is very important, because we are putting all our during the performance is very important, because there is the moment where we create the relation with the audience. And the relation with the audience is the one that closes the circle of the action. So basically, without the audience, I cannot do any performance. And then the after. The after is you, for example, going back home with a belly full of food, and also your mind's full of new memories. And probably in my performances, you will have a lot of storytelling. So you will also have my personal history part of your memory. So then that brings me to the second part of this lecture or presentation. That is how the relation with the audience is very important for me, and I will try to relate with a text that probably you read before. Is the relational aesthetics from Nicolas Bourriaud, and it's about how those artists like Ritchie Tiravania or I don't know, Yoko Ono, Marina Abramovic, um, do some kind or put some kind of instructions with people for making the people relate to other audience, to create relations or to establish relations that weren't there before the performance. So that's very important, because the performance is made by the audience, and through those interactions and those exchanges, the performance exceed the mind of the performance artist. So basically, it's not the performance artist who is making the piece. Um, I will also I would like also to relate those actions with the open work of Humberto Eco, and how it's the audience, the one that closes the work, because it's the audience who interpretate the piece. And as you can see, for example, with a painting or a sculpture, um, basically is the interpretation of the audience that closes the, the piece, basically. But you can see a painting over and over and over again. A performance, not, because a performance is an ephemeral action that has a beginning and an end. So you basically only have certain amount of time to close the piece, but it's an active closing, because you can discuss with other persons while the performance is happening. And in this text that you read before, there's something about, for example, theater or film, that you only have the time for this interaction at the end of the play or at the end of the movie. That is the time of discussing to each other. During the performance, that process happened the whole time. During the performance, you are responding immediately to the movements of the performance artist, or you are eating at the moment. So you are creating, you are closing this circle once, again and again and again during the play. But once the performance is over, this circle is closed. So I should say that the level of opening of that works, of the performance art, it's completely different to other form of art. It's more dynamic. Um, and that brings me to the movement and the changes on the performance art. The performance is always in movement. You cannot make the same piece again because several times, because always change. The body conditions are always different, so the piece is always different. And that reminds me, for example, another book from Nicolas Bourriou, The Radicant. Basically, the solution is to move. The movement is the base of the art. We cannot stay on the classics, for example. We have to move forward all the time in order to create new stuff. And in this creation of new stuff, we are creating memories. So that brings me to the collective memory and how the collective memory works in this kind of environments. In the environment of performance art is very special because we have the memory is it passed through our bodies. So the experience of our bodies is the main material of our individual memory. But in a performance art, it's the individual memory, but also experience shared with other people, with other audience. When Maurice Halbach talked about the collective memory, he was referring such themes like trauma, for example. The trauma is an experience that passed through individual bodies, but then is shared by a community. So I have, for example, I have an example very touching for me, and it's the dictatorship in Argentina during the late 70s and the beginning of the 80s. And there is a special case of this dictatorship, and it's the kidnaps. The government kidnaps people from the left wing, um, but the thing is, the soldiers always used a special and a specific brand of cars that was supporting the dictatorship. And the brand was Ford. And they had only one kind of Ford cars, is the Ford Falcon. That Ford Falcon has a special sound, a very specific sound, that even now the third generation after the dictatorship is still hearing that sound, and they get in panic just with the sound, but they never lived this experience. So it is very special that the grandparents of them, they were the ones being kidnapped, and they were the ones aware about that sound. When they hear that sound, everybody runs, everybody hides, and things like that. But right now in Argentina, somebody hear a Ford Falcon and will get super afraid. As, for example, maybe Colombians will get afraid with the sound of a 120 centimeters motorcycle. We have almost the same thing with that memory, but it's a little bit more present for us. So Maurice Halbach used that kind of relation between the experience of individuals and the shared experience of communities to explain how the collective memory is built. And I like to use that collective memory mechanism to create performances, to make individual experiences, but as part of a community. It's very important to make this flow happen. And I think there's no better way to do it than food, because we are all related with food. Through food, you can trace the history of your family. For example, there is an Argentinian artist called Gabriel Baggio, and his mother is from Italian roots, and his father is from Jewish roots. So through his pieces, he mixed those knowledge to create some kind of travel through the history of his family. And I use also this kind of background I have from being Colombian to research about the Colombian food. And I find out that, for example, we have dishes from that we think are Colombian, like empanadas. And Argentinians should say empanadas are from Argentina, but basically they come from Middle East. And before Middle East, uh, some historians said that probably empanadas come from Mongolia way back in time. And now we are taking those foods and putting some national identities on top of it to create our own narratives. But basically, through food, we can trace history of human migration, history of war, history of politics, everything just through a potato, for example. I work a lot with potatoes, and it's very impressive because potato is from South America. Potato is from the Andean range, Peru, Chile, and it's very impressive that potato is part of the main dishes of many countries in the world. Basically, potatoes save Hungary from hungry. And it is very special to know it. For me, the potato is the perfect metaphor of the good migrant. It was refused at the beginning because the Spanish people, the Spanish conquerors, thought that potato was something evil because it grows underground. So that means that it's the evil is always underground to the Catholic cultures and all this colonial thing. But after they were suffering hunger, they start eating what the indigenous eat at that time, and that was potato. Now in Europe, for example, the food from Denmark is based on potato and pork, and they only have like 4 or 5 kinds of potatoes, and we in South America we have 4,000 kinds of potatoes. But the potato has traveled through all the world and now is part of the culture of everywhere. That is very important for me to understand that through food we can basically cross those borders of identity and specifically national identities, to find other kind of narratives through food, and for me through performance with food. That brings me to the last part of the presentation, that is the document or the performance as a document, um, and should be a living document because video or photography or all these things mediated by technology are not the performance itself. So that's why probably main institutions refused a little bit performance art as a main way of doing art because they cannot contain it. It's almost impossible to contain performance art because it's ephemeral. As soon as the artist finishes the performance, it's over. What you get after that is the traces, probably the trash in the floor, that it can work as an art piece, but it's actually a trace, or videos or photos. But that is not the performance art. That is videos or photos. Now we are doing a research on how to documentate performance art through virtual reality. It's very impressive how with the Googles you can almost experience from the audience point of view the performance, but it's still being a document. It's not a performance. I find out that through instructions you can have a better documentation of performance art because when you follow the instructions, you are reenacting the performance, you are doing it again. So it's a way to maintain alive the memory of that performance. So I think instructions are very important for performance art documentation and performance art actions. And that, as the end of this talk, I would like to give you an optional instruction. It's up to you to follow it, but it's very important for me. So after I give you the instructions, I think Johnny will put my email on the screen, or yeah, they will try to put my email address on the screen so you can copy it. So the idea of the instruction is I always work with the personal memories of people. And this is very simple. I would like you to think about what is your favorite candy, what is your favorite sweet, uh, something that is probably related with your deepest memories, like when you were a child, or something that brings you to your first kiss or your first date. And I will like you to find that candy in the following week, um, found that candy and eat it and documentate that action in a video of 30 seconds, maximum 1 minute with your cell phone. um it's better with your cell phone because I think everybody has cell phones over there. Or with a professional camera, it's up to you, but it's not obligatory. It's optional. I will love to have that material the following week before Friday, so I can edit a version of the video collecting all your experiences, and that will be part of a small installation in the festival Viva Art Action. Yeah, that is the instruction. I hope you will follow it and send to me the material. Um, Thank you so much for listening to me, and thank you so much for attending to this lecture. If you have any questions, I would love to hear and answer your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David, for that. And just to follow up on your suggested action, what I'll do so that everybody knows, I'll collate the details that you just gave us during our class break and put it on the screen so that we all can write it down. And that's where we'll also be able to share your email. And then I can put all of that information on this, what we call a digital learning platform called Moodle. So everybody in the room can have access to that information.
Okay.
But to segue, while you're with us, how the questions can work, we have 2 roaming microphones. And so I'll ask my teaching colleagues, 2 volunteers, to run the mics around the room. I have the instructions from Johnny that when we give the mic to someone to ask a question or make a comment or a contribution, just make sure that we turn it on, but then turn it off when they're done, because feedback from the room will make it difficult for David to hear. And as you can see, David, the room is very big, so there might be a few moments of perceived silence, stillness while we get to somebody who has a question or comment. I know I have a bajillion, but I talk all the time in this room. So let's give a few seconds for someone in the room to come forward with a question or comment or reaction.
Oh yes, over there. I see the first one. Yeah. I can see you.
Hi.
Hello.
I can see you too. It's so nice. Thank you so much for speaking.
So big.
Yeah, it's a huge space. And such a cool topic. My question is to you is for about your like acquiring of the food that you create, and if you have a connection with the people who grow it.
The people who grow the food?
Yeah, like do you communicate with farmers near you? Do you like buy this food at kind of like a conventional grocery store? What's the relationship of like collecting the food as part of the preparation for performance, and like what's that like for you?
Yeah. Well, for that performance specifically, I didn't have a special relation with the producers of food. But one of my plans in the residence in Viva Art Action was to do that, because I would have 2 weeks in Montreal to research about local producers and try to cook food that is in like seasonal food to make it a little bit more fair. But for that performance, I haven't done that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
We have another question coming.
Cool.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Anastasia. Nice to meet you. Thank you for the
Anastasia.
lecture. It was very, very interesting. My question is about documenting the performance. I'm really curious to hear more the necessity of documenting because, as you mentioned in the lecture, that if you look at the picture, you can always look again and again and again. And isn't it the same if you look at the video or if you experience 3D experience again and again and again, and then it's slightly different than if the performance is not documented and then it's just like once in a life you see it and that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to answer that question with another question because one of my plans for this lecture was to give you some kind a candy in the entrance of the auditorium, but I couldn't because I'm not there. So even though you are looking at me and you are listening this presentation, I cannot touch you, for example. You cannot interact directly with my body. And when you are looking at the picture or in a video, you looking this video with the Googles of 3D, you cannot taste the food. You cannot know how the potatoes from Denmark taste and maybe think about, oh, it's different than the taste of the Canadian potatoes, for example. Or maybe a performance where the performance artist is sweating a lot. You cannot have that feeling. Obviously, you can see the document, but the document is not a performance. The body, the present body, the living body should be in front of you. It is a performance when you can feel the body close to you. Yes, it is like that. And of course, there is some performances where the audience is not directly related with the action because the performance artist is hidden in some kind of level. So I should say, for example, a performance of Bill Viola where he is masturbating himself to behind the the place, like in a platform of wood. So he was behind, jerking off. So he was not having a direct relation with the audience, but the audience knew that he was there, even though they couldn't see him. So I think, yes, of course, you can experience again and again and again the performance through a video, but you are not experiencing a performance. You are experiencing a document.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If I can ask a follow-up question on that while others are contemplating or that while we can get a microphone to the very far corner of the room, I'm wondering if what you're describing about documentation is changing as we become increasingly, I guess, digitally literate, if that's shifting our ideas of what an authentic experience is. Especially since you showed us the video at the beginning of your talk that was captured on virtual reality. And as virtual reality is now also facilitating these sort of embodied experiences that allow smell and temperature and other sensory stimulations. Is that something that you're interested in exploring through your future performances when you might not be embodied and present like you are tonight?
Yeah. Yes, actually, we are. Well, I'm part of a group of research in Denmark, and the name of this organization is Live Art Denmark. And basically, the research is about how to documentate and how to make the documentation closer to the actual experience of performance art. And of course, we have been developing more and more through 3D. For example, if you see that video with the Googles, you can see that like the quality of the video is insane. You can see the profound, the colors, everything is just amazing. But as you saw in the video, it's a collective experience. So the device of virtual reality is just for one person. you have experienced today in the auditorium the video, but was another person was clicking and making you to cross, like to see all the auditorium in the video. But if you are by yourself with the Googles, it's only you trying to experience from the perspective of a camera the experience of one person, but it's not the community experience. So it's like, I don't know, the objective of the camera is called objective, but it's not objective.
No, exactly.
It is not. So, and with virtual reality, it's very special because you can create your own subjectivity because you look wherever you want to see. It doesn't mean that you're gonna have like a more open experience. So technology is bringing us new kind of ways of approach documentation. That's true. But this sense of community, this touching to each other, talking to each other, it's not possible yet. But it's completely necessary in the action to start speaking about performance art. That's why, for example, I speak about instructions. If I tell you I'm not there, but I tell you to remember your candy, your favorite candy, and I'm sure that in all of you or most of you in the audience, you thought about the taste of that candy, and that's very special, and it's something that only you will remember. But you are in a crowd, and you probably spoke with your neighbor about, hey, my candy, my favorite candy, is not made out of maple syrup. It's another thing for other place. So that is something special, and and it is a relation that only happens if you have actual bodies around.
Yes. Yeah. And the space for improvisation. Yes. Great. Thank you for that. I think we have a question at the back of the room now.
Yes.
Okay, so essentially while you were talking in the video, you were talking about a lot about using hands. So I wonder, does reactions from the collective, from the people who are there when you host affects the way you perform? And how do they affect you essentially?
Yeah. Yes, totally. There was people who was thinking about not eating because they have they don't like to use their hands. They like to use forks and knives to eat normally. So it's very special to this kind of societies over here to eat with those tools. Um, and I also got this question before about if I think my performances for the audience, for the specific audience I will have, and I should say no specifically for the audience, at least not in the places where I'm living right now. And that's why, for example, I love to make actions in unconventional places because I don't expect nothing from the audience. The audience can be completely surprised, and the level of involvement will be completely different as if I, for example, do an action in a festival or in a gallery where the audience is used to performance art. So I should say it is also related with this text of Umberto Eco, the not the opera aperta, the viewer. I forgot the name in English, but it's about the perfect viewer, and he speak about an educated, specifically educated audience to art. And of course, in a gallery, I would have a different interaction than if I do the action in the street or in a bar or in a restaurant, whatever. I will have different interactions. So yes, in some way, I think a lot about the reaction of the audience and how they will interact with my piece. But I like the surprise, and I should say, for example, my first action in Denmark was very surprising because it was difficult to get interaction. I was giving food and nobody came to me. So I was in the middle of the gallery trying to offer empanadas and nobody came to me. So I was like scared because it was my first action in Europe, and it was not a success at that point. So I decided to go person by person, and it becomes like a ritual, going to the center of the gallery, to the sides, just to give the food each person to each person. And yeah, so that made me think about I should be aware about those kind of reactions to performance art, but we cannot control it. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. There's a mic already in the audience. Someone has a question?
Yeah, so my question is, since the connection of music and memory are so closely related, can you speak of the choice of music or sounds used in the performance and how they interact with the experience overall?
Yeah. Well, in that action specifically, I try to use only like electromagnetic sounds. So it is not. I didn't touch so much those sounds because it was only electronic reactions, basically to touch the food and to touch the earth wire. Basically, you did the connection and you create an electronic impulse that is translated into a sound. So basically, I was playing with those sounds. It was not related with specific memories. It was just electronic sounds, and I used some contact microphones to try to get the sounds. But I also use the sounds of the body. For example, connecting contact microphones to the body of the people who is sitting, um, and that is super interesting. And I don't think we are so aware about our own sounds. So we should be more aware about that, exploring how our stomach reacts to different kind of food. That is very interesting. Or the devices we use, how they sound. For example, the kitchen, the fire has a different sound. So I would like to explore more on that. I don't see it as a music. I see it as a pure sound. That's why I didn't change this materiality of the sound. It was just electromagnetic reactions.
Great. There's a question back here, someone who's had her hand up for a while. Just one moment, I'll pass my microphone.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for staying up so late for us.
Thank you so much.
I was wondering, as an artist, how much time do you spend on the performances, and when do you know when you're satisfied with your creation?
Well, for example, the video you saw now at the beginning of the presentation, the performance were almost 40 minutes. So I did a shorter version, but I think I will upload soon the biggest version so you can see all the reaction of the people. And I only put the first part because it was the storytelling part. But at some point there was a lot of interaction between people about the taste of the food, about the history of the food, about how it works, and they were also experimenting with the sounds, like hitting the plates. There was some super interesting part where there was one person taking the potato, touching another person, and this person touching another person, and the other was touching the air. So that create like a really, really big net of interactions, and I love that part. So yeah, I think it's very important for me to feel when the audience is it's ready, and I think the audience is the one to that set these periods of time when it start. I decide when the art piece start, but I cannot decide when it's finished. Sometimes I choose too much material, and I push myself to finish that material. A few weeks ago, in a festival about the Southeast Asian diaspora in the Nordic countries. So it was about migration, and I was invited because I'm also a migrant. So I use the potato as the metaphor of the good migrant. So I was asking in the street people for their names and their personal stories, and they gave me a lot of stories. And while they were telling me the stories, I was writing the names of them in potatoes, but I bought too much potatoes, so that took me like forever. And basically, I stopped when the people were asking, like, when you will cook those potatoes? We are hungry already. So it took me like probably 4 hours, and the performance finished when the people eat the last potato. So I cannot say that normally I set up my pieces in a frame of time. It is always decided by the audience or by the mood of the action.
Can I ask a very quick follow-up question on that? It's Maya's voice again. I don't think you can see me. Is the decision of the audience when they end the performance or when they carry it somewhere else? Do you think it's also the auspices or the responsibility, or I guess the verdict of the audience, whether or not something has been successful? Because I'm circling back to your comments on your first action in Europe, and you said it wasn't successful, and there's also a comment in one of the readings we were doing for this week by Pablo Guerra, the Mexican artist and educator, and he says, oh, this, whether or not something is successful is not the determination of the artist, it's of the art critic, which I thought was a very curious sort of passing of the verdict. So I'm curious to hear your view on that.
Yeah, first and very important, success is overrated.
Yeah, well said.
So yeah, I like when my pieces are in some kind of danger or boring or invisible, because I don't think art can be framed as successful by a critic. And I think the success of the piece is that you got some kind of interaction, where it can be a nice interaction, it can be a violent response, but as soon as you plant something in the audience and the audience responds to you in any kind of way, that is something that happened and affect the memory of the people who saw your piece, who saw your performance. So yeah, success, it can be overrated if you measure the success with smiles or claps or whatever success is measured in classical environments. But for example, the long durational performances, some performances that last 8 hours, days, months. So in those terms, it's not successful because the audience will not be there the whole performance. They just see part of the process. They probably take part of 5 minutes, 10 minutes of the process, or maybe more, but they are not the whole time. And I think I cannot decide if it's a successful piece or not just by looking the reaction of the audience during the whole performance. If they clapped or if they stayed with me the whole time. So no, I said that in my first performance because I was expecting the people to take the food. So at that moment, it was like a small crisis for me. So I decided to take action. So I was happy with the end of the action.
Thank you. There's another question here. I'm going to pass my mic, and then I think there's another one towards the middle of the room.
Okay.
Just one moment.
Hi. I don't mean to digress too far away from like the socio-political implications of the ancestral memory, because I think that's
sorry. I think I had a cut in the connection. Can you repeat me
I just want to say, as a more rudimentary question, I was actually curious about the signal flow and the compositional techniques that you utilize. I think that is there like a digital delay 3 by Boss and then a RC3 loop station?
Yes.
So like you're generating like electromagnetic conductivity off of the people from like the aluminum tray.
Yes.
Just that whole thing. It seems really cool. And I guess I would say, is it noise based or do you introduce a rhythmic sort of essence?
Yeah, the rhythmic, I introduced it because there were some people doing rhythmic stuff with the plates, and the sound was electromagnetic because I did a circuit with a circuit 444. So it was basically a simple this electromagnetic sound pen, but basically you hold what the earth is the paper with the graffito, and then when you draw, you can produce a sound. So basically, I did that circuit, and I kind of changed some details in the circuit. So that circuit I connected to the pedals and to the mixer, and that was all.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question.
The mic is already placed in the middle of the room, so go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My question relates to: do you have any criteria for performance art that you use to define what is performance art? And I give an example to see how that criteria would apply. Someone playing the card trick of the 3 cards with the marble, having a person in front of them that they interact with, and the person needs to choose under which card is the marble. A crowd is around, there's a lot of interaction, there's a lot of passion going on, there's sadness, there's happiness with winning or losing. Is this considered performance art, or is this considered the job of the person doing the card activity?
Well, I cannot pretend that I have the truth, so I cannot say what is and what is not performance art at the first place. I really appreciate the work, for example, of Marina Abramovich doing some kind of manual of how to find treasures, and in these treasures you are basically creating performance art. I call myself a performance artist, but I do things that are more related with the everyday life that basically cannot be seen as a performance art by many people. Like cooking is not a performance art for many people. It's not a performance action. But I think the person the artist can say this is a performance action, and the audience can also be the ones who said what is a performance action and what is not. And I will relate that question with a group from Brazil that you can find in Facebook. It's called Micro Performances. They are a group of artists based on Sao Paulo, and they work around the same question that you asked me. If a simple game in the street can be a performance action, or it is a work. So a critic, for example, would say, no, it's not a performance action. But if, for example, for me as an audience, as a walker or explorer of the city, I found something that is pretty strange, or brings me out of my comfort zone, breaks my everyday life course. So I, as an audience or as a normal person, I can say that is a performance action, and that is the work of those guys, this group, Micro Performances. So they are working about taking off the responsibility of saying what is performance art or what is not from the artist, and put the responsibility on the audience, the people in the street or in the gallery, they decide what is art and what is not. So it depends on the viewer, the responsibility to say what is and what is not, because there's a lot of performativity in those kind of street jobs, or in, I don't know, for example, the flying attendants. Some of them are really performative, and I should say they are doing some, like, a great job as a performance artist in the flights. And I assume my responsibility as a viewer to say this is a performance action and this is not.
Thank you for. I like the democracy of your answer. If I can ask, if you have time for maybe one more question,
Yes.
is that okay?
Yes.
I think the
Yes.
mic is already placed over on the left side of the room.
Hi, thank
Hello.
you. So my question has to do with in the preparations of the performance. Are there steps you take to assure the consent of your audience when creating collective memories together?
Well, yes, I'm always thinking about how I will create some kind of experiences together with the audience, and that is very important for me. So the process of the memory, of the creation of memory, that is something that is like not under my power. I cannot say what is going to be in the memory of the individuals, but I can place the trigger of an experience. So basically, the audience is the one who decide if they want to interact with my piece, and they decide how they will remember this experience. So yes, of course, I think in the preparations, how I would like the audience to perceive and experience and interact with my work, but it's actually on the audience, that part.
Maybe we can use that as a really nice segue to think about the consent of the audience who maybe needs a break, and also for yourself that maybe it's time for the evening to come to a close. But I'd like, whilst I still have the mic on, to maybe mic some applause from the room to send it over to you in Copenhagen. Can we please all thank David for his time? Wonderful. Thank you so much. And whilst you have been here in screen capacity, your contribution, I think, has been really keenly felt. So we're very grateful for your time. And when I hear back from Michelle or from yourself, what might be happening in terms of your flight, I'll certainly relay it to everybody in the room. And we'll hand out the Viva pamphlets so they can know more about the festival. And of course, you will likely be hearing from several people in the room vis-a-vis the documentation of candy consumption, which is very delicious, literally and metaphorically. So, muchas gracias. Buenas noches.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
A todos.
A la
Buenas noches.
próxima.
Bye.